Welcome back. Jesus told us that no man knows the Father except the Son. And we've been talking about Jesus being the one who reveals and unveils the nature and character of God the Father to us. We've seen that Jesus, when he came, sought to straighten out a lot of misconceptions about his Abba. He showed us that God was not a God who was distant or far away, but was one who was near. One who is not a harsh, angry judge, but one who was a loving and caring Father. That he wanted a relationship with us and was more interested in relationship than rules. And that this God was a God who didn't hate and reject people, but this was a God who demonstrated great love and compassion for all humanity. Jesus also came to show us something else about God because, again, Jesus was God incarnate. He was God in the flesh. That God had made the decision before the creation to eternally join himself to humanity by taking on human nature and human flesh. And one of the things that we see that so delighted God about all of this was that God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, that God was interested and concerned and delighted in normal, everyday life. That it was important to him. It had value to him. That God was interested in knowing what it was like to learn. To know what it was like to live by faith. Yes, Jesus had to learn how to live by faith and trust his Father to provide for his needs. Jesus had to learn about God. He had to grow in his understanding of who the Father is. What the Father's like as a human being, as a man. Now, in his day, he was certainly approached and attacked with all kinds of theological ideas about God that were wrong. And he had to reject those in the face sometimes of overwhelming opposition as he was growing and embrace the truth about his Father. God loved being one who got up in the morning and went out and started a day of hard work. He knew what it was like to have to go and find work. He knew what it was like to have to stand by the bedside of his earthly father, Joseph, and watch him die and not be able to do anything about it. He knew what it was like to be the provider for a single-parent home. He knew what it was like to be a brother to his brothers and to his sisters. He knew what it was like to have to deal with cantankerous people who would come in and not be satisfied with maybe a job that he had done, or people that maybe refused to pay on time for work that he had done. He knew what it was like to enjoy a good meal and a hearty glass of wine. He knew what it was like to sit around the table and laugh and tell jokes and enjoy other people's company. He knew what it was like to walk all day long on a dusty road up and down hills and through the mountains, and to sit around a campfire with a bunch of guys at night laughing and talking about the experiences of the day. He knew what it was like to eat over an open fire and enjoy a good meal with good company. He knew what it was like to go to celebrations. He enjoyed parties and meals. So many times when you look through the New Testament, you find that Jesus was at somebody's house eating. He was sitting at some table with somebody or at some celebration, enjoying the laughter and the drinking and the eating and just the fellowship and the camaraderie and the company of other people. That God enjoyed normal human existence. That it was sacred. All of it was sacred to him. It was precious and important. He knew what it was like. Not just to have to face death, but to enter into the very gates of death. It wasn't just that he was going to sit back and that he, would get a little touch of it. He went and knew what it was like to physically suffer. He knew what it was like then to be caught in the icy grip of death itself and taken from this realm into the next. He passed through that experience and, of course, came out the other side 3 days later victorious, having conquered that death and realm and the death and that whole realm of sin and Satan, but having gained victory. But nonetheless, and even after his resurrection, catching the disciples one day out on the Sea of Galilee fishing and inviting them to breakfast and having roasted and cooked fish over a fire and some bread and, just to enjoy breakfast together. Jesus wanted people to know that God was not some weird religious doctor sitting in some ivory tower somewhere that was aloof from and not interested in normal everyday life. He knew what it was like to smell the smell of suffering, of pain, of poverty. He understood what it was like to walk through city streets and see people begging and his heart going out to them. People that maybe didn't have a lot at all and who were struggling for their next meal. He understood the whole scope of humanity and every aspect of it because he loved living as a human being. God the Father said, this is important. So much so that I want to experience it. I want my son to experience it. And God experienced in human flesh what it's like to be one of us. And he wanted people to understand that. And for the people of his day, again, that was a hard concept to grasp. How can God, the Almighty Yahweh of the Old Testament, be interested in living just a normal everyday life? That tells me that everything that you and I experience, of course, he's been through it in one way or another. He understands. He knows what it's like to be a human being. He knows what it's like to not always know what's coming on the next day or even sometimes where your next meal is coming from. He knows what it's like to have to trust and depend upon God to provide for you. He knows what it's like to lean into the Father for comfort, to look to him for strength and help. He knows what it's like to look to him for guidance and wisdom and direction to discern what he needs to do in making decisions. He understands it. And everything that, by him coming on and taking human flesh, tells us that everything that we do is sacred. There is no sacred and secular pie in our lives in this world. Everything is sacred. Everything is vital. Everything is important. It all matters. And God has entered into it. And Jesus wanted people to understand that his Father was interested in normal everyday living and enjoyed it thoroughly. We have a great banquet that we're looking forward to being a part of one day in the kingdom. And how Jesus is going to put out a spread for all humanity on the mountain of the Lord, as Isaiah describes it. And we are anticipating that time. But I want you to be encouraged today to know that God knows what it's like to be you. And he delights in normal everyday activities. So as you spend some time today beholding him who's always beholding you and smiling, know that as he smiles upon your life, he smiles upon every aspect of it because it's all important to him.